My name is Doreen. I think most of you know me. I'm sorry that we're having this introduction every week, but we're also having some new guests every week. So that's why we try to give a little background. So I work at IOM. IOM is the UN Agency for Migration. I work at the office here in the Netherlands. We have different types of programs that are aimed, in the field of migration. And I work in a unit specifically on diaspora engagement because we believe in the potential of diaspora. So we have programs that are focused on transfer of expertise, but we also have a program that is specifically focused on entrepreneurship and trying to assist people with a migration background residing in the Netherlands who have some business ambitions for their country of origin. So we have this pilot project now ongoing for Ghana and Ethiopia. So we started almost 2 years ago with a group of 20 entrepreneurs from Ghana and 20 entrepreneurs from Ethiopia who have been selected based on their business ID. And together with them, we offered them different types of assistance. So first of all, we organized a series of trainings in entrepreneurship. This was also done in collaboration with ZD. And then afterwards, we also assigned a mentor to each individual entrepreneur to refine their business ideas. From this group of 20, we have selected 10 per country also who will be entitled to go on an exploration mission to Ghana and Ethiopia. This was scheduled in the spring. Unfortunately, due to the situation, we had to postpone it, and we hope it can take place in September. So this group of 10 per country will have 1 week where they will visit different institutions, meet with other entrepreneurs, meet with financial institutions, etc. But in the meantime, because we know that the topic of fundraising and access to finance is always a difficult one for anyone starting a business, so that's why we came up with the idea of organizing a series of webinars with interesting speakers to offer a little bit an insight into the different opportunities that exist in terms of access to funding or being investor ready. So I'm very much looking forward to the session of today again. I'm also recording this session, so I hope that nobody has an objection to this. We also do this because some of our people cannot join at this time, so we can share the recordings later so they can also see the presentation. So I give the floor back to Frida, and I welcome our two speakers of today.
Thank you very much, Doreen. I think before we proceed to our next speaker, let me mention a few rules. We tried to mute everyone today, so you're not going to have back and forth. But if you are muted, please don't try to unmute yourself, because then we hear all your background noise, which will distract all of us. The other thing is that we have chat. We are going to direct our questions on the chat. And I would strongly recommend you to chat, to type your questions as the speakers continue. And at the end of each speaker, we're going to have Q&A, and I'm going to read out the questions and the speakers can answer. So without wasting time, I'm going to go to Postar Chikaoneka from Growth Africa. And I already said a little bit about himself, but he can introduce himself and go.
All right, thanks, Frida. Good afternoon to everyone. And I think firstly, thanks to Frida and Doreen for giving us this invitation to join you this afternoon to kind of talk about what we do as an organization towards trying to help the growth of entrepreneurship across Africa. So I'm Posta Chikaonega. I'm based in Lilongwe, Malawi, and I'm what you call a growth catalyst. And what that essentially means is my role is to support the entrepreneurs that we work with along growth journeys, essentially. So I think for this afternoon, what I'm going to try and do is just give you a bit of a background of Growth Africa, some insights into how we operate, some of our experiences so far in Ghana, Ethiopia, and Malawi, and then maybe just also give you some ideas in terms of what kind of additional resources we provide for our entrepreneurs in terms of giving a well-rounded support for their growth journeys. So Growth Africa is what you can refer to as a business acceleration firm, organization, as well as an advisory firm, right? So we essentially run, or we're in 6 countries at this point in time. So headquarters is in Kenya, but we're also in Ghana, Ethiopia, Zambia, Malawi, and Uganda. The company's been around since 2002, and as it stands right now, we run acceleration programs across the countries, right? If you to give an overview of how the acceleration programs run, basically it would be useful to try and think of it in kind of 3 ways, right? So there's a process of outreach and recruitment whereby we basically open up for people to apply to for consideration to get into the program. And this is facilitated through different platforms such as social media, but also we maintain a very connected engagement within the ecosystems that we operate in. So that means we are also able to kind of do targeted recruitment where it needs to be based on.
I'm sorry,
Hello?
for some people, I am not able to unmute them. Okay.
Yeah. Met Datje spreekt u. U had mij vanochtend gebeld, zodat ik me weer kon inschrijven.
Who is talking? Because I can see most of us are muted. Doreen, can you mute the people who are not muted?
Yeah.
I try to,
En dan zeg ik, oh,
but Datje,
alles gedaan.
she's always...
En ik sluit af en dan...
Datje, I'm sorry, but we can hear you talk. Can you please mute your microphone?
Door mij naar de bus gaat.
I don't know why it's not working.
Ja.
Should I continue?
En ik heb een brief van bus ontvangen.
Doreen, you're not able to mute us?
No, I cannot mute her. I don't know why.
I sent her a message.
I'm trying to... Okay, I will move.
I think on the top there you can type her name and then you can be able to get to her.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm so sorry for this.
En ik heb... En dan komt... ja, het komt... het wordt nu afgewerkt door sociaal domein. Dus...
Okay. I think now we can proceed. I sent her a message.
I don't know if it's even her now.
Dus ik heb...
Inge, is it you? No, it's not you. I'm so sorry.
I can be able to view all participants, but I can't mute them. Okay, I think it's fine. Posta?
Okay. Yeah, so I think what I was explaining is that so we run these acceleration programs where we have an outreach and recruitment phase, which relies on one, there's the social media and online channels that we have, but also we keep a very connected network, or we stay connected in our communities with alumni as well as various other people that are referred to us through these different networks, right? After the recruitment and the outreach, then there's the actual acceleration program, which will run for about 6 months. And then after the acceleration program, then there's post-program support. And now part of that post-program support involves being able to connect the entrepreneurs that go through our program with access to investment from external capital. So that in a nutshell is sort of what the acceleration program looks like. The whole point of the acceleration programs that we run is to be able to get the businesses that we work with to become investment ready. So this requires us to go through a systematic process of identifying where there are gaps in terms of the runnings or the operations or the setup of a business. And then at the end of the 6-month acceleration phase, then we come up with a plan for how to turn the business around, how to grow that, and find solutions for the gaps that have been identified through the whole process. So in terms of Ghana is a recent entry for Growth Africa. I think we went in there last year. But one of the things that is looking to be quite promising in that sense is that there isn't necessarily too much external capital available per se, but it's a new market with quite a lot of opportunities in terms of upcoming businesses. So part of the role that Growth Africa plays through the programs that we run and the partnerships and collaborations that we develop along the way is to be able to help investors who have an appetite for new markets to be able to navigate those markets and help them identify high potential investments that they could make through our intervention with entrepreneurs on the ground. So I think in that sense, what is also key to outline here, one of the propositions that we give or provide to the entrepreneurs that come through our program is the fact that there is a lot more value for them to be able to gain through the fact that at the core of how we operate, we look at collaboration being one of the cornerstones to being able to ensure that we give our entrepreneurs the different kinds of expertise and support that they need, and we leverage that through the different partnerships that we develop along the way. In Ethiopia, right now we are on the third cohort, right? And I think Ethiopia is quite interesting in the sense that there are not too many external investors as well, but there's a need when you get into Ethiopia to be able to kind of ensure that you have the right kinds of partnerships with local investors, right? Because one of the things about Ethiopia is that one needs to be able to understand the regulations that exist there in order to basically understand the rules of engagement, if you will, in terms of making investments. So, for example, if you went into Ethiopia as an external investor, for example, there's a minimum capital injection that you'd need to make of about $200,000 whereas if you did the same investment in partnership with a local investor, then the minimum investment capital sits at about $150,000. So I think what this goes to underscore the same that in all the places that we are in, it's really beneficial ultimately to the entrepreneurs that we work with that we have these existing networks and partnerships that help us to help them better navigate the different spaces or requirements that they have. And then I think just to juxtapose Ghana and Ethiopia against, for example, where I'm based, Malawi. In Malawi, it's a bit of again, slightly different context in that. So there is quite a significant amount of grant funding, if you will, coming into Malawi, right? So, for example, the program we run is supported by UNDP, and the Royal Norwegian Embassy. And what we have done in terms of delivering the project here is to ensure that to counter the grant financing that comes in, the entrepreneurs that we work with are required to match that with a 30% commercial contribution. So to that end, what has happened, for example, one of the really interesting that has happened is obviously traditionally the commercial banks have been quite averse to investing in startups or SMEs. But as a result of the interventions and the technical assistance and capacity building that we provide through the acceleration program that we run in Malawi, for example, you find that right now we've got 2 commercial banks as financing partners on the program. So these are National Bank of Malawi as well as EcoBank. So in that sense, part of the preparing these businesses to become more investor ready has allowed them to access financing or that they would not been able to have otherwise accessed by themselves. So I think that is testament to the fact that if we can demonstrate the ability to transform businesses from the levels that they're at and help them to be positioned for growth, then in the same process, we are also giving confidence to investors for being able to put to back these businesses along those journeys. And then in terms of additional resources that we provide to entrepreneurs, so on top of the acceleration programs per se, there are different other avenues that we also open up for entrepreneurs to be able to support them even further, right? So one of the things we do is we have master classes, which are organized periodically, and those are geared towards addressing areas that might not necessarily form the core of the acceleration program that we run. So these master classes could be anything from, how do you do better record keeping or things like that. So the topics tend to differ, and this is driven by needs identified by and through the entrepreneurs that we work with. Another service that we try to provide is to be able to support the businesses we work with in terms of financial modeling, and this is something that I think allows them to be able to develop some better financial acumen or understanding around how their businesses could grow and what kind of things they need to think about in terms of ensuring that growth actually actualizes. Furthermore, we also provide services geared towards helping entrepreneurs have meaningful interactions and conversations with investors, for example, right? So, for example, we do pitch training through we've got a Norwegian partner that comes and does that sometimes as well. But the whole idea is that pitching is a core skill that is needed for entrepreneurs to be able to articulate some of their investment and finance needs. So that's also an initiative that we try to provide to our entrepreneurs. And then we have a platform that we call the Gazelle Forum. Now, the Gazelle Forum is essentially a platform whereby we get a couple of investors into a room, and the entrepreneurs that we work with or invite there, then are able to pitch to these investors in order to be able to solicit some investment or financing into the business. And as far as the type of investment or financing tools that are available, so we in-house have an investment lead who works very closely with the entrepreneurs that go through our programs, and he or they would then look at the specific needs of the business in question, and based on those needs and the needs analysis, then they would be able to agree from there what kind of financing or investment would be best for the for the business, and then which of the potential investors or financiers within our networks could we be able then to connect them to in order to facilitate the process of these entrepreneurs potentially getting some investment into their business. And I think finally at the beginning I was talking about how we've got we are an acceleration firm as well as we do advisory, right? So in terms of advisory, there is a component of a non-programmatic approach to the support that we give to entrepreneurs. So whereby an acceleration process is a program of sorts. With our advisory services, we're able to plug into existing initiatives and be able to provide specific kinds of support that will be needed to bolster the businesses or the entrepreneurs for themselves. So for example, this could be things like financial literacy, right? We know that a lot of businesses struggle with that. So we've got products that can address things like financial literacy. And also speaking to our role in the different ecosystems, we, for example, try to play a role in capacitating incubators, for example, in the sense that we understand that if we can contribute towards helping incubators become a lot more capacitated to build businesses in the early stages, then we know that we are kind of developing an ongoing trajectory whereby we then are creating a pipeline for the different businesses to be able to work a lot more towards the growth plans that they have. So I think in a nutshell, that would sort of be Growth Africa's approach to business support. And yeah, I think I could take any questions that might be there.
Thank you very much, Posta. Maybe most of you are wondering why Posta gave this presentation, but our thought was that, you know, you may have ZD in the Netherlands, but when you go to your local countries, especially to Uganda, Ghana, or even other different countries, you may not have that support. So the most important thing is to be in the ecosystem. You have to be somewhere where other starting entrepreneurs are, for you to have that, even for encouragement or to know what's happening in terms of resources, to know how other fundraising, other entrepreneurs are fundraising locally, or just even for knowledge, maybe for introductions in the banks. And one of the questions that I have in terms of that, Enoch is asking, in addition to the 6 months acceleration program and mentorship that you have, do you provide grants and loans? And two, does the entrepreneur ask to go through the 6 months acceleration program to be considered in your organization?
Right. So in addition to the 6 months acceleration program, so we try and facilitate investment into the business once someone has gone through the acceleration program. And the reason for that is that the acceleration program is geared towards ensuring that when you go and start having a conversation with an investor, you are in a lot stronger position than you would have been before you went through the acceleration program, because we're doing a systematic audit of how you can be able to operate better and realize the growth ambitions that you might have as a business. So we don't necessarily provide the grants and the loans or the financing directly, but we work with a network of investors or financiers that offer different kinds of financing instruments. And then in terms of whether you have to go through the acceleration program to be considered by the organization, so I think it's kind of related to my first response, in the sense that the acceleration program is designed to help you be in a better position to absorb the investment or the financing that you're looking for. So we have a heavy focus on the businesses that go through our acceleration program. But as I mentioned, there is the advisory arm, if you will, of Growth Africa, and that's not necessarily always tied to the acceleration program per se. So this could be, for example, an initiative by, let's say, I'll give you an example of Google, for example, right? So they might want to be able to support a specific kind of intervention for a group of entrepreneurs. And that's something that would have a different selection process as to the actual acceleration program. So there are those different kinds of options. But what does run across them as a thread is that we have seen that being able to take entrepreneurs through a journey whereby they can learn from each other and use a peer-to-peer approach is a lot more valuable than necessarily a one-on-one in some senses, because what happens is when you are a group of entrepreneurs going through a specific journey, what happens is you are actually benefiting from a collective experience of entrepreneurs, and that's where different ideas and strategies are born as well. So one of the things we do focus on is to try to make sure that there's a lot of peer interaction over necessarily one-on-one support.
Just also maybe to add into that, we've initiated discussions with Growth Africa because we had a core area with Costa and his colleagues, and I said, well, like all the entrepreneurs that we are bringing from diaspora, they have undergone training, you know, all those things. They have done pitching training, they have modeled their financial projections, they have gone through business models and all that. And our idea was not to replicate what we've already done locally. So a partnership that would enable, especially the people in the ED for the program, to get local support and get that community locally without really having to have prerequisites of going through the whole program. So I think we'll keep you updated on that kind of arrangement. But the other question is about what's the minimum and maximum amount. I think I'll pass it because they already said they don't actually give loans directly, but they work with partners. But maybe on to the next question, where somebody is asking the specific sectors that you operate in and what criteria you have for evaluating entrepreneurs. Maybe when you answer those two, you can mention on average what's the capital requirement for your entrepreneurs, maybe.
Okay. In terms of sector, we are sector agnostic, right? So there isn't necessarily a specific sector that we focus on and say this is just it. So it's literally an open board. But you do find that maybe there could be instances where, for example, a program or an intervention might be targeted at a specific sector. So if that does happen, that is something that we can do. But as an organization as a whole, we are open to any sector. Criteria for evaluation, I'm assuming in terms of being considered for the program. Would that be it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So as an acceleration or as an accelerator, essentially, it's different to incubation in the sense that we are trying to provide a runway for an already moving vehicle, right? So to that end, we look for post-revenue businesses, right? So what that means is you're operating, you are generating some revenue, and you have some traction, and you've got a potential to be able to grow. And what we do is we bring in the additional business support expertise to allow you to be able to do that, as well as hopefully investment after that. So essentially, you'd be operating maybe an average of, I think, about 3 years or so. Turnovers, we look at something in the range of, I think it's $100,000 annually. We also look at the composition of the management team. So to be able to get an understanding of the capacity of the leadership in the sense of how equipped are you to be able to move the business to the next level. And that doesn't necessarily mean that one is precluded by their shortcomings from the outset. It just means that it gives us an understanding if one gets into the program about what kind of areas of support they would need a lot more help on. But those would really be the main things. You're operating, you making some revenues, you've got the capacity to grow. There is some impact that your business can have as well, and you are able to absorb the capital that you require.
Okay. The other question is, do you charge for training? And if yes, how much?
Right. Again, I will assume when you say training, you're talking about the program itself, right? So the acceleration program in 5 of the 6 countries, yes, is something that the entrepreneurs do bring some skin in the game too. So there is a bit of some flexibility around the payment for that. But essentially, yeah, there is a fee that is attached to that over the course of a 3-year period. Malawi is a bit different because, as I mentioned, it's a UNDP funded initiative. So that's something that they kind of have footed on behalf of the entrepreneurs.
I think somebody asked, so not for startups. So if somebody, for example, some of the diaspora entrepreneurs that we have are really startups. So they are purely startups. They have a strong business plan. They have assembled a team, but they are going to take their first steps. So it seems that those cannot qualify to join the program. Costa?
Yeah. So in terms of fit, right? I think like I've explained, the focus on acceleration is really geared towards businesses that are already on a runway and they need a bit of some wind and a push to be able to lift even further. But I think as far as startups go, if we look at the advisory bit I was talking about, part of the key thing that drives advisory is to be able to ensure that we are stimulating kind of 360 growth, if you will, in the ecosystems that we're in. So we might not necessarily be able to take up a startup as part of the acceleration program, but we have within our networks, for example, incubators or different other types of entities or programs or initiatives that are able to do that, knowing that if we can facilitate that kind of participation or support from an early stage, then that is a business that is most likely to be able to also then graduate into the acceleration program that we have, and we would be able then to continue that journey along.
Thank you, Pusta. Maybe I can't see any other question, but I have my own question. So what's the success rate? What's the success rate? So after 3-year period, what has been your experience with these startups and scale-ups? Are they post revenue? Are they scaling up? What's the situation?
Right. I think, okay, let me try and give it to you in terms of, I guess, some statistics around some of the gains that we've made, for example, right? So if you look at, let's say, the facilitation of financing. So from 2012 up until now, a combination of investments and grants, et cetera, that we have been able to facilitate, you're looking at something in excess of $60 million US, right? From 2002 up until now, the number, okay, so on average, we would take, let's say, between 10 to 15 businesses into the program on an annual basis, right? So from 2002 up until now, you're looking at something of over 200 entrepreneurs that have been successfully accelerated, right? And I think also what's really key is that we are about ensuring that businesses grow. Yes, that's at the core of it. But at the same time, it's also ensuring that those businesses that we are helping to grow can also have impact beyond themselves, right? So, I mean, some of the analysis that we've done has shown that in the course of the acceleration that we've done, for example, we've created something of around like 30,000 additional jobs that were not there through these businesses that we work with, right? So, I mean, it's not always every business that's going to be successfully accelerated, but I think the track record shows that we are able to successfully help entrepreneurs and take them through this journey of being able to get to the next level.
I have another question. Is it possible to give us some of your financials, banks or financial institutions, especially for Ghana or Ethiopia? And yeah.
Sorry, may you repeat the question?
No. The question is if you can be able to disclose some of the financials that are in your network. So like banks or financial institutions or whoever financials you have in your network, especially now for Ghana or Ethiopia. Can you do that? Or, I mean, if it's not possible, you can always send messages later.
Yeah, I mean, I could try to get back to you on that. Sure.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other question is what startup landscape and support attention are they getting from governments and funders? Wait, I have to oh yeah, I think someone is asking about the whole startup landscape and support or attention that is given by funders or governments in the African countries, like in general.
Okay. I mean, I think it varies a bit, right? So, like I mentioned, if you look at the Malawian context, there is a lot of interest and attention from funders here in terms of the entrepreneurial space and the ecosystem. So, there are many opportunities for people to access grant financing, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's necessarily the case across the board, but what maybe the other countries might not necessarily have in terms of grant financing, you find that some of the other places have a lot more enabling environments for entrepreneurs, right? So you look at Ethiopia, for example, whereby there's been a proactive take or stance by the government in order to stimulate certain industries, for example. And an example of that would be construction, right? So I think it varies a bit depending on where you are in terms of whether you could access things like grant financing or whatever, but there's also a difference in terms of the kind of environments that are created by the governments there to stimulate economic growth. And I think Ghana and Ethiopia are probably, if I compare to Malawi, they're probably a lot more intentional around ensuring that entrepreneurial space is being stimulated.
Yeah. And somebody is asking where is the location in Ghana, the office? But I can see it's in the first row of Kanda Estate, Accra, Ghana. But I don't know where that is, but maybe we can give them later.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, that's also all available on the website. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a final question for you, Postar, before we close your session. Is there any final advice that you would like to give our group of entrepreneurs today before we close?
Yes. So I think part of the big learning in terms of working with entrepreneurs or startups or early stage startups, if you will, is that it's important for us from the get-go, I think, to be able to take a lot more of a intentional approach in how we structure the way businesses are run, right? I think one of the big challenges that we do face as African startups is, being able to look at a business as a standalone entity and treat it as one, right? So I think my advice would be, it's that perception or the way we look at that from the get-go that kind of creates a mindset in which you can focus on something as a being or a living thing that you can help grow, and in that way that that would allow us to be able to really understand the true potential of the businesses that we have, and how that can then build on and impact other people beyond the business itself. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Postal. I have also typed in the address, their office address in Ghana. But apart from this, of course, there's the website of Growth Africa. I can also give you the contact of Postal if you need to contact them. But thank you very much, Postal. I think it was a nice session. I enjoyed it. I could see people nodding. So I think everyone enjoyed it. And I think it's good to, as entrepreneurs, to know that you have some local support, which most of the time as diaspora is always very missing. So I think you stay with us, Postal, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Grace Kamara. She's the managing director of Limit Fund, and I don't want to preempt anything. I think she has a lot in store for us, and she is going to take the floor, or the web, and explain to us what they are doing and what kind of support they have for the entrepreneurs and diaspora. Grace? Grace, are you there?
Thanks.
Grace? Is she muted?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Frida. And thank you for organizing this. Thank you to Dorian and IOM for organizing this webinar. I do actually have a presentation, a short presentation that I thought I'd share with everyone. So, Frida, if you're able to share that with the group, that would be great.
Yeah, Dorian is sharing. Maybe you can maximize Doreen to make it more visible. Yes.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm just going to, I thought it would be helpful to give a short presentation about what we do at Remit Fund, because we have quite a unique business model and approach to supporting diaspora entrepreneurs. I'll start by saying that our main ethos is that we really want to channel investment and make access to finance easier and more accessible for diaspora entrepreneurs. As I'm sure you're all aware, there are a lot of acceleration programs, a lot of incubators, and a lot of support available to entrepreneurs in the diaspora and also on the continent. But oftentimes the availability of funding is something that is still a major issue for entrepreneurs all over the world, but particularly if you're working or if your business is focused on the continent, this can often position you in a place where investors are not so keen to, perhaps, general kind of mainstream investors are not so keen to necessarily take the risk because of the perceived risks of the continent and the economies, etc. So we're all about trying to push funding and push investment towards diaspora entrepreneurs so that they can be successful. We do that with quite a unique approach. So if you could maybe go to the second slide, fantastic. So we work with diaspora entrepreneurs, as I said. I'll come on to this in a bit more detail, but just to give you an overview, we essentially work with entrepreneurs whose businesses are focused on job creation as a kind of an umbrella term or umbrella focus, but specifically in sectors that are aligned with the UN SDGs, so that we can demonstrate quite clearly our impact. So just by way of example, agribusiness, renewable energy, and ethical manufacturing, ethical fashion designers are one of our particular focus, because believe it or not, this is a huge area for potential job creation. And obviously something that can be easily imported to global markets and help to strengthen supply chains on the continent. So that's kind of an overview in terms of our focus. We can go to the next slide. What we've tried to do really is to leverage the financial flows that we're seeing in the form of remittances to the continent. So this is quite an old figure, and particularly with the current situation, we will probably see a drop in remittances, or we have already in some cases. But in general, we see about 40 billion every year going to the continent, sent by the likes of you and me in the diaspora, to families, to businesses, for whatever reason. But these are huge numbers. So really the idea of Remit Funds essentially is to take a portion of that and redirect that towards supporting businesses, whether they're led by Africans in the diaspora or locals, and to help them get the finance that they may not otherwise be able to have access to. So even though I think it's a really nice juxtaposition of numbers, when you see that even though you have 40 billion in financial flows going to the continent, you have on average about 50% in unemployment in the continent. In some countries, it's as high as 75%. And that will probably increase given the current situation. So there is a real dire need to redirect financial flows and investment to entrepreneurs. And as we know, business and SMEs particularly are strengthen economies and are the mainstays of most economies. So it's important for us to support those. We go to the next slide. So what we do is we partner with money transfer operators. You all know who they are. And we basically through their digital channels, we enable individuals who send remittances to donate a percentage of what they send to our fund. We are a donations-based platform, which means that whatever you donate, you give. It's not an investment per se, but what we do with those donations is to reinvest those in specifically diaspora entrepreneurs. So we tend to like to focus on entrepreneurs who are in diaspora that have African-focused businesses, and we do that mainly because we ourselves are diaspora entrepreneurs, and our networks are very strong. We really want to support diaspora entrepreneurs who have a very unique advantage in a sense in terms of their networks globally as well as locally on the continent, to really help scale their businesses, or indeed grow their businesses that will have a positive impact on the continent. So we partner with these money transfer operators. We're able to do that fairly easily because of technology. And essentially, when you go and you donate, say, 100 euros, you can donate 1% of that, or whatever you choose, to our fund. And the idea is, our kind of tag headline is that if we donated, if everyone donated 1% of what they sent, that would be 1% of 40 billion essentially going to this fund, which would create a lot of capital for investment in African businesses. So in addition to being a fund that provides finance and also connects, we do also connect our diaspora entrepreneurs with investors as well, as co-investors. We also run masterclasses and events which really help to strengthen the pipeline of investors that would be eligible for funding from us and our co-investors. And we really do this not just because it's nice to have events and kind of connect with people, but also because we found in our research that there really is, we know that people are doing this. We know that there are individuals in the diaspora that want to be entrepreneurs and are thinking about how they can go about doing this, but we don't really know that. I mean, no one's really doing sort of high-level research on where these individuals are, what their demographic is, and what we're trying to do is to really understand, what moves someone into this area. If you're working a 9 to 5 and at the same time you want to be an entrepreneur, is why, and how we can help you to pursue that. So if we could go back to that. So we have a number of events. We tend to make them sector specific. So we don't like to do sort of general business events. We like to focus on a particular sector so that when the entrepreneurs come along, they can be introduced to other entrepreneurs in the same sector and potentially form partnerships, but also be introduced to sector-specific impact investors. And these are pictures from an event we had on agribusiness, and we had investors from AgDevco and others, which is one of the biggest impact investors in agribusiness there. And the second picture, you can see one of our entrepreneurs, diaspora entrepreneurs from, I think it's Zambia, were pitching their business to our expert panel. So it's a really great way of while we don't run it in an accelerator, but this essentially is a kind of mini accelerator in the sense that you come along for the day, you get to see others pitching, they get feedback, and you really learn in a very interactive environment. It can serve as a as a motivation for you to go ahead and do what you want to do in entrepreneurship, but also as a way for us to get your details, put you, know that you exist and be able to support you going forward, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're a startup or you're looking to scale an already successful business. So in terms of our sector and regional focus, we, as I said before, we're very much aligned with the SDGs, and we tend to focus on these 6 areas of business. And our focus countries, I will say, a bit like Growth Africa, we are sector agnostic, but we tend to see a trend in terms of the entrepreneurs that come forward to us, and also where the impact investors want to put their money. So it makes sense to really focus on those sectors that are well funded, or potentially could be well funded. One thing that always excites me is that we really love to work with African fashion designers, and the reason we do is because a lot of them they have global markets anyway, and African fashion is, it's very popular globally, and so this is almost an easy sell for us in terms of getting impact investors interested in this area, but is one that tends to be neglected by traditional donors because agribusiness is where you go, or solar, or renewable energy. It's actually potentially a huge job creator in terms of the manufacturing textile industry. So we like to champion those fashion designers that have very good followings on Instagram, and maybe selling their wares in big companies and big retailers in the US or in Europe, and actually want to focus their manufacturing locally and create jobs for women particularly, and skilled jobs as well. So this is one area that we really love to focus on. And then in terms of the regions, we like to work across Africa, but we do have some countries that we focus on, and mainly because of the sectors working for those countries being well funded. So where our investors are interested in, and also just because we work in the US a lot, and in the UK, and in France, so we tend to get a lot of entrepreneurs from these particular countries. But again, we consider any country that is, or any business that is viable. So as well as the master classes and also the funding, we also work with our entrepreneurs. So this year we have a cohort of 10 diaspora entrepreneurs that we've taken under our wing. I should say, it's not on the slides, but we don't work with startups. We're quite a conservative fund in that we work with entrepreneurs that already are revenue generating, a little bit like Growth Africa, and have some traction or some track record. Revenue generating doesn't mean profit generating, so that's not necessarily a requirement, but it is a requirement that you have put some skin in the game and that you have been at this for a while, because being an entrepreneur is not easy, and the number one thing that you need is resilience for the amount of times that you're going to fail and be told no. So it's much easier to work with individuals that have been doing this for a little bit of time. And these are just some of the types of support that we provide. A lot of our entrepreneurs, certainly the current cohort that we're working with, have all been working for about 2 or 3 years on their projects, some a little bit longer, and are looking to scale or pivot depending on the market need. And so we come in and help them sort of, optimize their business models so that they can have the bigger reach that they want to have. Some of them are fairly successful in the regions they're already operating in and want to replicate in other regions in Africa, which we think is fantastic. We're all about sort of duplicating and replicating these existing successful business models. This is one of the easiest sort of lower hanging fruit that we like to go for. So while we don't discourage, of course, startups are important. It's important for people to take those risks. We as an organization tend to focus on established businesses, but we definitely encourage startups or those that are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs to attend our events and to get in touch so that we know that you're out there and we can support you through our networks. So my final slide, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the present day and the current situation, because I think it's important to put things into context. We, as an organization and with our partners who are remittance providers and money transfer operators, there has been a decline in remittances, and that will affect obviously the levels of funding that we can raise, but it will also affect households, of course, and remittances being essential services. It's really a kind of belt bracing time for everybody. The knock-on effect, of course, for our entrepreneurs is twofold. The first is, their actual business operations. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs who have supply chains. So they sell their product globally, but they have local supply chains, and they sort of, if it's an agribusiness company, for example, they will rely on local farmers to produce their products. And the current situation is seen for them a drop in their demand for their products, and which of course affects the supply chain throughout all stages. So this is something that we are hearing more and more about, and trying to work with our entrepreneurs to make sure that this doesn't subsist in a way that has an impact, because as you can imagine, it's the poor individuals that are part of the supply chain that are most effective and that don't have that safety net. So that's something I think we need to be aware of. And then on the other end is, of course, the investment landscape and what amount of investment is actually available to our entrepreneurs going forward. What we found is with impact investors, of course, they are tightening their purse strings, and it's going to become more competitive than before. But at the same time, there are new opportunities. If you are working in health tech, in e-health, those areas, in essential services sectors, there is actually more money flowing in there. So I would encourage anyone, if you are if you have an existing business, or if you're if you're a startup, that can potentially pivot and take advantage of some of the flows that we're seeing into particular sectors that are related to COVID. And it's not just healthcare. It's things like drones. It's manufacturing. If you already have a factory with if you already have a facilities with manufacturing capability, you can potentially take advantage of the need for, say, masks or other equipment. So we are seeing, it's like with anything, the boom and bust bubble. And if you can see it as a challenge and opportunity, or you can take a negative perspective depending on your disposition. But for us, we've definitely seen less kind of enthusiasm from investors, but at the same time, from more traditional donors, the bigger ones, there's a lot of money being pumped into certain sectors. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think there are a lot of opportunities, and certainly some of our current cohort are pivoting their businesses to take advantage of funding available for COVID-related sectors. So really, that's it from me. I hope that's been a helpful introduction into what we do at Remit Fund, and we're really looking forward to working with more and more diaspora entrepreneurs and getting to know you guys and supporting you in any way that we can.
Frida, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I forgot. Thank you very much, Grace, for a wonderful presentation. We will go to Q&A, and I'm not seeing any questions on the chat. Could you please start typing? And if I can ask a question, so I think you kind of mentioned some of the requirements, but if you could tell us how you donate, how do you evaluate, a scale up, well, or a business that is, of course, generating revenue? What's the process like? I think people would be interested to know.
Yeah, so we don't have an open call for funding. What we do is we handpick our entrepreneurs. We're very much in a stage at the moment where we're trying to figure out who's out there and who and which businesses, what types of businesses, what sectors. So we've chosen this year for the cohort that we're working with this year. They've all been handpicked from our network. So you can't currently apply to us for funding. And we think this is a much better approach because we really want to work with businesses that really do have potential to scale and be successful. So in terms of the criteria for those businesses, they're all revenue generating, like I said, not necessarily profit making, but revenue generating businesses that have been going for at least 2 or 3 years. And what they're generally looking to do is to grow their business, to scale their business, take it to the next level. Or they've had initial seed funding and they're now, their product is ready to go to market. But most of them are fairly established. But that doesn't mean that we would work with startups or businesses that are at an early stage. It just means that we would probably work with you with our networks as opposed to directly. We're really trying to focus on businesses that can have a bigger impact. So kind of channeling our energy to those businesses that can make the biggest impact at this stage.
Thank you for that. The next question is, who will access the social impact brought, and how will this be informed back to the diaspora? So in terms of, because it's remittances-based donations, somebody's wondering about the impact and how you measure it.
So we have a internal way of measuring the social impact based on UN guidelines for measuring social impact. So we do that internally, and then externally we publish a social impact report which shows which businesses were invested in and how many jobs were created and whatever other social impact those businesses may have had.
The other question is, can the donors or investors choose which businesses to invest in, or will the remittances be spread over the businesses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've done it. We've set it up in a way that everyone, when you donate, you're donating to Remit Fund, so that our fund as a general donation, and that's spread across the businesses. We really didn't want it to be a case of, it's not like a typical crowdfunding platform where you see the business and then you can make the donation, simply because there tends to be a little bit of bias when you do that. It's fine if you have platforms that do that, that's great, but we didn't necessarily want to go down that route because we didn't want a case of, sometimes with the diaspora, it's emotional investment. So it's, I'm from X country, so I'm going to invest in this business, or this is my sector of interest. And actually what we wanted to do was make the decision, from a business perspective, which businesses actually got what and how much they get. So we prefer to make that decision internally based on our expertise and local knowledge and local intelligence, rather than have, everyone's investing in the fashion designer from Ghana because they saw her on TV or something like that. We wanted to make it a little bit more business focused in terms of how the decisions are made on who gets what.
So the next question, to what extent does your fund help in decreasing unemployment amongst the youth?
So the fund is very much focused on 50% of our fund investees are women-led portfolios of women-led entrepreneurs. From a youth perspective, we're not specifically focused on the youth, but obviously we do focus on businesses that can demonstrate job creation. So we really like to work with manufacturing businesses because that tends to be very labor intensive and requires the employment of a lot of people, and those tend to be young people. I wouldn't say we have a specific focus on youth, but definitely job creation and labor intensive sectors and industries are a priority for us.
Okay, and somebody's asking, how much do you charge for your training?
Right, because so we're a charity, we're a non-profit organisation. I should say that we're based here in Belgium. We don't charge anything for the training of the diaspora entrepreneurs that we work with, that we've selected. That's all included in what we get funding for. We do charge for our events, but we charge a nominal fee. So our masterclasses tend to be, just to cover our costs, so that anyone who's interested in becoming a diaspora entrepreneur, no matter what your income bracket, you can afford to go to these masterclasses and get inspired. So it's a very low fee that we charge, and it is essentially training because it's a whole day of very specific, focused sessions and talks from leading experts. So it is essentially training.
So the other question, just 1 minute. Do you have new masterclasses scheduled?
Yes, we had a masterclass that was scheduled on the 7th of May at Facebook in New York, and unfortunately that was cancelled. That was supposed to be on renewable energy specifically, and we had to postpone it, obviously for obvious reasons. So we're hoping that in autumn we'll be able to find a new date for that class. So that will be the next masterclass, hopefully. And if we can't do it in person, then it may be something that we do online. But we'd much prefer to do it, in person than online, because the last masterclass we had was, a huge part of it was the networking that happened after the masterclass. So.
Okay, do we have another question from the audience? I don't see more questions. I'm trying to remove another presentation so that we can cover up for the time. Otherwise, I didn't pass any question at the moment. What is this?
I think it's always nice to ask our presenters if they have a tip for our entrepreneurs. It's been our standard question, closing question of each session. But would you have any advice to them?
Yeah, I think my main advice is that know that if you're going to go into this, that you really need to be very resilient. And it's not an easy option, but it's a very rewarding one. That failure is part of the process, and getting told no multiple times, there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. And actually, I think now, with all the technology that we have and all the organizations like Remit Fund, like Growth Africa, that really do want to support entrepreneurs, now is a fantastic time to get into this. I think a lot of people in the diaspora were working 9 to 5, maybe more than, multiple jobs. We've got families. We think we can't do this, but actually, if you're determined and you have the support, you absolutely can, because most of our entrepreneurs that we work with, this is not necessarily what they do full time. This is something that they're doing on the side and that they've been doing for a number of years. And that really speaks to someone's character if you're able to balance those things, and actually really prepares you for real entrepreneurship. So don't think that it's too late for you or your circumstance isn't right. I don't think there's any particular right time to start. Obviously, you have to go into things with some prudence and risk, examine your risk, and especially in the current climate, but that doesn't mean that you won't succeed. So I think that would be my number one tip. I think my second tip is try to have a broad and open mind about what area of business you go into and which region. I wouldn't necessarily just focus on where you're from originally or where your family are from, particularly if you're interested in a particular sector. It doesn't necessarily mean that that sector is going to work in your country. So try to have an open mind about, try to think from a very unemotional business perspective when you're looking at your business. And also when you're examining your business and what works, what needs to change, try to look at it from the investor's perspective. If you were an investor and you were being asked to put your hard-earned money into a business, would you put your money in your own business? And if you can't say firmly yes, then that's absolutely normal, but just know that means that you probably have to do a little bit more work to get your business proposition to where it needs to be.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. I think it was a very informative session. I am sure now the diaspora, because most of our audience are diaspora entrepreneurs, so they know where else to knock for help. Of course, for Zidi, it's been a lonely journey because we are trying to, and that's why I like also what Limit Fund is doing, is trying to get diaspora have or come up with solutions for the diaspora or for the African continent, because most of the time we are the people who understand our markets very well. We understand the risks. We understand the returns. So I think it's very, very important for us to support these kind of initiatives. I think also because we have our 15 minutes to go, I would like to present how Zidi works as well, because in the coming week, we have 3 presentations, one from Rabobank Foundation, another one from who else? VC4A Africa, and another from AHL Venture Capital. So I don't know, Doreen, if you have the presentation with you. I shared. Did it come?
Okay, I haven't seen, but normally you have the presentation, right? So normally you can share yourself.
Because I'm not able to share I'm not able to, you need to give me the rights to share.
I did.
Did you? Okay. Is okay. Did you receive it, Doreen?
I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think I have it now. Yeah. Yeah, you can see it now. Yeah.
Yes, we can see it. Maybe you can do full screen. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So let me take this opportunity, at least for the new people. I think most of the ED 4D program participants are aware, but let me just take you through the ZD Circle platform and how we operate. I call it an alternative financing platform because we are trying, of course, to demystify the whole fundraising and funding scenario. You know, I'm sure all of you have gone to the banks knocking. You've gone to even investors like funds. You've tried to get angels, and most of the time you take so much time fundraising than is necessary. So how are we organized? So we are a platform that is enabling diaspora entrepreneurs as well as migrant entrepreneurs to raise capital, especially to grow their businesses in Africa. And sometimes we also work with supporting migrant entrepreneurs who are here, who, for example, do not know how to navigate the system to get funding, even for their business that are here. So on one hand, I think on my left, you can see diaspora founders, and most of you are in that picture, about 40 of you. And most of you have really nice, innovative businesses in Ghana and Ethiopia. But of course, we work with also other countries like Zambia and Kenya and Uganda. So most of the time, the diaspora entrepreneurs are always caught in between. Sometimes they are, you know, when they go to their countries of origin, they left there 15, 10, 5 years ago. There are no records for them to access funding from the bank. When they are here in Europe, Netherlands, or the US, they cannot also get funding because most of the time the funding solutions are destined for the country that you live in. So they are always in between. And I think when we started ZD initially, we thought we would ask so many diaspora people to invest in businesses in Africa. But it turned out as our research that most of them also could not fund their business. So what did we do? We came up with a funding platform that enables entrepreneurs to raise funds, you know, in an easier way. And we use a crowdfunding model where we originate businesses, but also do all the due diligence, as well as when they are ready, then we invite our crowd to invest in them. We do this also because we realize a lot of businesses are not investor ready, and I think that's where also the partnership with IOM came about. Because a lot of people say, well, I want to, I would like to get funding. Where do we get funding? And most of the time when we scan those businesses, we find out that they are not investor ready, that they need to finish or complete certain elements so that they can get funding. And that's why we combine this with capacity building, with coaching to enable these businesses, you know, at least get strong so that when the investors come on our platform, they really find good investable cases. So I won't dwell so much on the why we are doing this, but it's the same thing that I said that, you know, a lot of businesses, especially in Africa, 90% of them are SMEs, and yet 60 to 70 of them cannot find the financing. Sometimes it's really, really expensive locally from the local banks, you all know. From Ghana, we are talking of 25%, 26%. I'm sure also Ethiopia is not different. Kenya is not different as well, 15%. And when you compare with the developed world, yeah, like when you compare with Europe or the US or the UK, entrepreneurs have the same issues, but the only advantage is that they have access to more affordable financing. So how does our platform work? We like because most of our investors actually do not come from Africa. So we like to provide as much transparency as possible. So if we come to your business, for example, and you want to invest, you're looking for an investor, the investors ask us to provide the team. You have revenue. Are you licensed? Are you paying taxes and all that? So we try to provide as much information as possible so that to make our investors, you know, have the appetite to invest into the businesses. We also look at the security. Of course, we understand that the diaspora people may not have land or buildings, you know, they can use for security. So we use other alternative forms of security, such as receivables or stock. The stock you have can be used for security. The receivables, so all the sales that you make that you've not been paid, we can use those as security. And I'm very happy with countries like Ghana and Kenya, where we can be able to charge these alternative securities online. So how does the investment process work? I don't have my phone, so I don't know about the time. Doreen, now you start timing me because I'm now the presenter.
I will. You still have at least 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'll go really quickly. So the investment process, of course, is that we originate. And how do we originate? How do you get to find us? We call it a circle because we like the entrepreneurs, either local in the African countries or diaspora that we've already invested in, to introduce us to other investors. And that's the way we actually use the diaspora as our market reach. We have a good network of diaspora. And most of the time, they even introduce us to other businesses apart from their own businesses. So we conduct the due diligence, which of course includes, you either send us all the information when you're doing the application, as well as we send our local teams to visit your business to really verify that everything is fine. And once you provide us with all the information that we need, then we are able to invite investors to invest on our platform. So what do we require? We require businesses to be at least legally constituted locally. So if it's in Ghana, we require you to at least have the business registration. You've been operational. For us, we don't really look like you're of course, you have taken the first steps. So we look at the entrepreneur themselves. How are they working, and are they committed to the business? Are they doing it full time? Have they taken the first steps to make sure that they are generating revenue for their business? So you may not actually be making profits, but at least we can see you in that journey, and then we can be able to help you to go to another level where now the accelerators of this world can take you. So we also look at the bank statements, annual statements, repayment capacity, a referral from our network, indicative budget, and now all of you can be able to project the revenues. I'm not going to dwell on the investors because investors is easy. We just need to identify you because of anti-money laundering. So our strategy, of course, is driven by the diaspora themselves who are investing in their countries of origin because you're an entrepreneur, you're also an investor. And we also like our diaspora to co-own businesses with the local people, because that's the only way we can stimulate local growth and create more employment, create sustainable businesses. And of course, we like the diaspora as well, even if we want to invest in you, to invest through our platform, because you are the only people who can tell the world how Africa is and how businesses are, how you're trying to change your own countries. So this is just a picture of, you need to change the narrative as the diaspora. Even if we need the funds, we need to set a good example. We focus on sectors which, of course, are driven also by the UN sustainable goals. For example, agriculture. African countries, most of them are driven by agriculture. We call another category industry because we want sustainable manufacturing, construction, renewable energy, healthcare. We are kind of also trying to look at different sectors where there's impact. And these are some of the diaspora entrepreneurs. Like the Ghana, we have a nice poultry farm. We have renewable energy by David, one of you guys. We have healthcare in Ghana. I think this is due froze. You don't need that. What operational resources do we have? We partner with a few other partners. So we have AZA, which is our payment gateway and remittances as well. And we have, of course, they are new in the market, but we found that they have penetration to different African markets, that we don't have a lot of currency issues when we are dealing with them. We have investment license from the guide class, and of course our own technology. I'm not going to dwell on how we ensure that you're performing, but I'm going to go to the team. Starting with me, I am the founder, of course, and we have good background in finance. We have Edgar. Edgar used to work for FMO, which is a Dutch development bank. We have Wembin, who is the portfolio manager and controller. We have the East African manager, who is Charles Nyamo, and the rest of the team are investment officers from Ghana, Kenya, and Oratire is from Botswana. So I'm rushing into it, but how do we make sure that we are fundable? We try to make the loans really, because now we are issuing loans, so we try to make them really affordable by of course, we asked our investors, how much return do you want? So they drive the interest rate. So if the investor want to earn 5 to 7%, we only increase that by another 3 to 4%. So to give an indication of between 10 to 12% in general. Yeah, and I think that's it in a nutshell. I really lashed through the presentation because I knew we don't have time and we need to give everyone a chance, especially Doreen, also to give a vote of thanks. I don't know if we are on the last minute, but I'm sure for all of you, I'm going to send you more details on how you can make an application. And I, of course, I've evaluated most of your businesses, so I know those that are already qualifying and those that we have to work with them continuously to reach there. And that's why we are trying to mobilize all sorts of partners to be able to fund at least everyone to take the next steps. So Doreen, shall we give the vote of thanks?
Thank you, Frida. We hadn't really planned this presentation, but I thought it would be useful especially for the external guests to at least present ZD what they do, because they're very useful to our group of entrepreneurs as well. I just wrote in the chat if anybody has questions. I think we can have another 5 to maximum 10 minutes. So feel free to write if somebody has a question for Frida.
Yeah. I know we have questions. It's actually 16:30, but
I haven't seen anything, but maybe I saw on the pictures that one of our participants, David, is part of your platform. Maybe you can tell something about this experience.
So with David, what we are trying to do, we are trying actually to mobilize other partners like institution banks that are in the Netherlands that want to do renewable energy. So we are using David as the installer for the solar panels, and in return, ZD is managing all the SMEs that are getting funding through them. So I think that's what I can see. Do you charge something for your services? Of course I do. ZD. Of course I do. That's why I said our revenue model is based on the investors as well. So if the investors want to charge you 7%, we increase that to 3 to 4%. That will cover all our business. And Frida is asking, the investment can be project specific, on the contrary to remit fund. Yes, of course we have. I said we are impact driven, so we are focusing on manufacturing, because we know manufacturing is lagging behind in the industrialized world. We still are importing a lot of produce or all sorts of materials from other continents. So we really want to mobilize that. We want to invest in agriculture, renewable energy, healthcare, things that are really community-based and that are stimulating the economic growth. Yeah. Do you have to pay upfront? No, you don't have to pay upfront, but we charge a success fee of about 5%, and this we deduct from the funding. So no pay, no gain. No pain, no gain. I'm even confusing it. Yeah. What other thing do you have? No more questions. Perfect.
Okay, I think then we can leave it at this. I think an hour and a half. Everybody gets a little bit tired, but you know that CD will be with us for the next sessions too, and you know where to find her. So if anything comes up later, you can just get in touch with her. So thanks everyone again today for joining our session. Thanks so much to the speakers, Grace and Poster. Let's stay in touch, and as usual, we'll send you the follow-up materials and even the recordings of these sessions later. We already have the agenda for next week up. Frida already mentioned we will have a Rabo Foundation, we will have Venture Capital for Africa, and AHL Venture Capital. So you can find it on our website. You can register again for next week. And after next week's session, we will have one specific session for Ghana and another one for Ethiopia, because before we close everything. So I hope to see you next week. I don't know if Frida has a final thing to say.
Yeah. Of course, I always have something to say. Well, I just like to say, well, of course, thank you very much for joining these webinars, to our speakers and all of you participants. And I'm just trying to, Doreen and I really work tirelessly to try and make sure that you have all the available materials, all the available information. But of course, in the end, it's up to you to make a decision on how to proceed. You have to, if you think Remit Fund is as your solution, please feel free to contact them. We are just trying to invite as many people as possible, give you as much more materials as we can, establish partnerships that can support you locally. So we are really trying our best, and we really want you to succeed. And I expect you also to be really proactive and take the opportunities as they come. Yeah. Thank you very much. See you next week.
See you all next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Frida. Thanks, Doreen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.